So we're back, about to start a session on, action learning and grappling with challenges. The Ellii programme that we're running, can you just move back one, Shelley? Thank you. The programme that we're running, the Ellii programme, has got a number, about 35 women's support organisations on it. And obviously today here we've got just under half of those joining us today. So there's immense knowledge within the group, because we've got very diverse organisations. We've got small organisations, large organisations, brand new, still emerging organisations, to those that have been running 10 years, 20 years plus. So there's a real breadth of knowledge and a real energy and passion across the group to want to connect, work smarter together, and so forth. So as part of this programme, looking at enterprise learning, leadership, innovation and influencing, a big part of this is being able to build trust, unlock knowledge, talent, and troubleshoot challenges together, whether that be, like today we're looking at organisational challenges, or whether that be more sort of larger scale societal challenges. And previous in the programme we've looked at these problem trees, which are kind of bigger societal challenges. And what we're hoping following today is we're going to start a process and start the learning on what are action learning sets or action learning groups. How do we use peer learning effectively to get ahead with what it is we're doing? And between now and next spring, we're offering to put on some additional action learning groups beyond the programme days that can help people come back together to continue doing this, be that on a kind of a problem-based organisational challenge, or be that on wider thematic challenges. So we'll come back and chat to the group about that shortly, but first things first, I'd be interested to see, with like a show of hands, if you either wave at us or stick a little icon up if you know how to do that. Who's used action learning methods before, or been just having a little scroll? Some I'm seeing one or two. I'm not seeing heaps there. These methods, if you're providing support and coaching and these sorts of things to other groups, you may well have trained in delivering action learning. Or if you're managing an organisation, or you've worked in organisations that've got a really good learning culture, you might have used these techniques before. But what we wanted to show you today was a broad range of different techniques. Again, might well be overwhelmed because we're giving you a lot at once to look at the options here. Some great options of using action learning, but then what we're going to do is bring it back simply to offer you some questions just to start the ball rolling, with some open and closed questions to help you help one another move towards tackling some of those challenges that we talked about earlier, be they around resources or bids, or managing an organisation with lived experience, putting together strategic plans. Whatever's a priority for you right now, members of the group here will be able to ask you questions to help you overcome any barriers that you've got in trying to progress with what you're trying to do. So that will become clearer shortly, but for now we've just got a little bit of information on what these things are. We've got some methods, different kinds of ways of doing this, just to give you a flavour of what we could do in the new year. There'll be some of you that this is new to, and so you'll want to keep things simple, and there'll be some of you that have done this stuff before, and using different methods might be helpful in pinpointing something or stretching your way of doing this. So we're trying to offer people different options. In principle, action learning, it's a way of learning by doing with and from others. It's basically a chap called Reg Revens, as it says here in this little quote, coined the phrase action learning groups. He didn't coin the phrase peer learning. That's like a general term that a lot of us use, and we've tacked this on because we think that the two things go hand in hand with this programme, and basically really throwing yourself into learning by doing, using experience and lived experience, both drawing out and drawing from your own experience and lived experience, as well as hearing from others who are also in a similar boat, who might also be having to immerse themselves in learning by doing, is a really good environment to be able to create this action-oriented way of learning. But it just takes some, it just takes some patience, and it just takes some structure, as you'll come to see. So what we're suggesting are, the ingredients for this to work well, is that people bring some sort of real problem or real challenge to the table, that's relevant. They're living this challenge, and they want some support to overcome it. Now that might be an organizational challenge like we're focusing on today, or as we move forward to run these groups again in the new year, that could broaden out to other things. And often it can feel quite complex, and it feels like there's a high sense of urgency around trying to tackle this thing. If you're trying to get funding bids written, or if you're trying to manage a staff team, or if you're trying to cope with a period of stress or overwhelm, or whatever the challenge might be, it's giving yourself some space to tackle this head on, and be open to being asked some questions gently in a nurturing way that helps you move forward with whatever the challenge is. We have your group, so your action learning group, will act like a problem solving team, if you will, a little sounding board, or a set, an action learning set, or an action learning group. You might hear these terms used. And we hope that through the questions, some simple questions that we've got here today, but also we did send in advance this set of critical thinking questions for anybody that wants to stretch themselves a bit further. It gives a way of reflecting, promoting curiosity, inquiring into things in ways that your brain might not be fully questioning you about at the moment. So having people ask you questions objectively, and having somebody just check in with where you're at, and remind you of certain things, or ask you to explore or think about something from a different perspective, might just unlock that light bulb moment, or make you do something or act on something that you perhaps previously not felt able to or weren't aware of. So these conversations are ultimately trying to be series of questioning techniques that then promote you to then take some form of action, and hopefully moving towards some sort of solutions, or breaking through barriers and overcoming challenges. That's the whole point. And a bit like when we talked about ground rules earlier in the session, it does take a commitment from the group in these breakouts and in these conversations that we're going to have, and trying not to be distracted by whatever's going on around you will really help both the group and the person posing a challenge make the most of that time there. And ultimately it's time for you guys to reflect. You've all given yourselves this gift today of being on this program day, when we're all so busy. Everybody's probably juggling a million things, so giving you some really useful time to reflect will be helpful in a focused way. We hope that you're going to gain some widened insight in some way. You'll either gain widened insight on the challenge that you're trying to overcome, or the way that you've been trying to tackle it, or you might learn new things about yourself or others, or the context of the situation. In addition to just reflecting on things with questions, there's often ways that, by building trust and having conversations with new people, networking, ultimately, you'll gain new contacts and connections. We'd hope, through the nature of the conversations you're going to have, and what action learning promotes, is helping people find alternative solutions, and as we've said, ultimately access peer support and other forms of expertise. So that's what this stuff is all for. And we hope that over the course of the next 45 minutes to an hour, you're going to experience the benefits of some of this. Do you mind putting the next slide along, Shelley? So this has got a lot of words, this slide, but it's just reiterating aspects of what we've been saying, where what you can gain, really, potential outcomes from these sorts of things. We hope, and we know from having either run them in this way that we're doing today, but also some of you might have been on a mentorathon of ours, where we have these mini sounding board sessions and troubleshooting sessions. It really, it helps act as a catalyst for increasing your knowledge in different ways on a whole range of topics. Not all in one go, obviously. Having multiple sessions helps do that. But if you're in a group today with 4 or 5 people and a couple of you get to bring a challenge to the table, you know, there'll be a lot of learning that happens all around, because whether you're bringing a challenge to the table or whether you're you're acting as that sounding board to discuss one, you're all learning and reflecting on how you are experiencing that issue, and whether it's something you've grappled with before, whether it's something that's new to you, or whether you're living it now, and the suggestions coming through and the questioning is helpful, then that all helps build your knowledge. Obviously, we've talked about this building trusted relationships. We feel it's a really holistic way to get cross-sector perspectives. Obviously today, most of us are working in the women's support sector or the social enterprise world or the charity sector. So there's a kind of microcosm that we're working in here, but we've all got our lives. We're coming here as individuals and we've all worked across various sectors, and for other action learning sets that we run, we'll often bring different characters in from different sectors to bring in different knowledge and expertise. So those are options for the future. You know, clearly it's going to give you an opportunity to troubleshoot something today, and with this structured way should help gain some impartial insights and perspectives that might be different to your own. And we would say, you know, if people are questioning you and they're questioning, you know, the challenge, really, it's not necessarily something to be taken personally, although we're human beings, we'll take aspects of this personally. It's a way of the group here trying to help you think about which routes and which directions of travel are best in order for you to progress. Obviously, it's going to take time to reflect, and we're already starting to gain new contacts through the programme, but this will just give you more time to do that. We're about to put the next slide on, shall we? So we've basically I'm going to just minimize a few bits and just ask you guys, obviously we had ground rules earlier, but in listening to this and in knowing that some of you have done action learning before, it'd be interesting to hear, you know, what do you think your needs might be, you know, as a group of people from an experience like this, or from a group of peers in this way. I might ask if you take the slides off for a minute, Shelley. We can see people's faces and we can just take a few minutes to think, you know, if we're going to go into breakout groups and we're going to talk about some of these challenges that cropped up for people earlier, or, you know, organizational areas for development, and thinking around how somebody could be almost coached and you know, and helped to think about what their next steps could be, or what's stopping them, and these sorts of things. How might we need to operate these to get the best out of them? Fire away, Jenny.
Thank you. I've run some of these types of programs previously, and I run a lot of peer support groups and my own sounding board. And the main problem that I see with them is when everybody doesn't engage in the same kind of way, because we're all women, and one of the things that women like to do is talk. And we can talk about all sorts of things, which is very interesting. I like nothing better than being in a room with a group of women and sharing all sorts of things. However, that's not an action learning set.
Yeah.
And I think that that's critical. It would be critical for me that we had not necessarily a set of rules, but it actually did work. So we did actually learn by doing. It's very easy saying what we're going to do. It's not as easy actually doing what we say we're going to do. And that would be very important for me, Michaela.
Brilliant. No, and you've touched on a few important points there as someone who's experienced these. So absolutely, there's an element of structure there. In a moment, I'm going to show you a few different kinds of structures for future use and to think about, that we can come back to. And then Shelley's going to outline a structure that we're suggesting people use today, a simple one. And, you know, it's still talking, and it's still down to the individual to act. And the learning by doing bit more so might come if we decide to collaborate on things further down the line in March and beyond. But certainly in terms of being able to ask some specific action-oriented questions, that's certainly where we're hoping we're going to get to today. Anybody, any other needs that they might have from conversations like this? Thinking I was going to put some bubbles on the slide, but if I'd put my bubbles on the slide, it would be things like you know, reiterating that point around confidentiality. You know, people, this is people's organizations, it's their inner intel for whatever they're prepared to share, or it's their sort of personal experiences potentially, depending on what they're talking about. So confidentiality is often a big thing with this, and you know, people will only share what they feel comfortable with, and you know, when people might pose a question, you don't have to answer a question, or you can say, yeah, I'm not ready to answer that question, or that's something I need to think further about. So there's ways of thinking about how you operate, you know, within a discussion that's really there to help you unpack, you know, how you want to take your next steps in getting some of these action-oriented things done. Kathy had a hand up there.
Yeah, I would reiterate that. It's, you know, if people are going to expose themselves to the vulnerabilities, it's really important not to talk about this anywhere else. And also for people, don't feel pressurized that you have to do something.
Yeah.
If you don't feel like it's the right time for you, it's not the right thing. You know, don't feel like, you know, all these suggestions are coming at you, or questions that you have to actually do something about it if you're not in that place to do that.
That's a really good point. Yeah. And, you know, as I've said before, we run these things called a mentorathon. It's like when we've done, it's like a 12-hour mentoring marathon. And, you know, some of you here have experienced that, so they'll know, you know, there's all sorts of, today is going to be slightly different to that, because they're very much structured questions, aren't they, Shelley, to help that individual come to their own resolution and their own conclusions.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a bit of a whistle stop, but it's to give you a taste of the structure. And we won't have time for everyone to bring something to the set, but it's a flavour, because again, it's a tool that you can take away and use in your organisational context, or you might want to use it with some of your service users, because the structure, you'll see the structure is empowers the person to take the action that they want to take.
Exactly. Yeah. I guess before we get into some of these methods, should we just see any final thoughts on, you know, we've talked about having some structure, we've talked about being confidentiality. I think, you know, people have got to be, well, you can't force someone to be compassionate, but, you know, I think just a recognition that everybody's in a different place, and coming from a different point of view, and a different level of whatever's going on in their lives today, or this week, or this year. So I think just that the method that we're going to use today is quite a gentle method to, as you say, Shelley, help people take their own natural next steps in taking things forward. Anything else people have got in mind? And as I said, today's just a bit of a practice run, or a refresher for people that have done this before, and then we'll just before lunch we'll have a quick chat about the best way to pick this up with this group and the wider group, if you want to run some more of these. So are you right to put the slides back up, Shelley? And what I'm going to do to give us more time to talk in groups, because I think that's what's important, is getting you into breakouts to use the tool that we've got. I'm only going to run very quickly through these alternative methods. I'm just going to lightly talk. Here are some examples, you know. So there's different examples for the ways in which people do action learning. And we're going to send you the slides after today for those of you on the programme, and other people watching this on recap can get in touch with us. But you know, today we're really going to talk about things in the round. We're going to give you a way to have an open, reflective discussion. We're going to give you some, you know, time to practice asking questions of one another in order to help you overcome a particular challenge, and potentially see things from other people's perspectives. But ultimately, today is going to be really much about focusing on your own journey, your own challenge, and how you want to move forward with coming up with your own solutions to that. The next method that we've got, which some of you will recognise if you've been on our mentorathon, is this bear pit method. So again, in a sounding board, group setting, it's a different method altogether, where people will present a challenge to the group clarify what they've heard, and they then discuss it. And the person bringing the challenge to the table acts like a fly on the wall and listens to a conversation that plays out. And it's a really fascinating, useful method. It's not the one we're going to use today, but it's certainly one that we'll be coming back to in March with people. And we just wanted to share that this is another example of ways that action learning can help people, tried in different ways. There's another method here called the Goldfish Bowl. And we're sharing these because obviously we've got people running different sized organizations. And if you've got a staff team, and you're thinking, how do we tackle challenges in the organization? How do we bring things to the table and talk about things openly? Having a tool bag of different ways of discussing things, or different ways of training groups on this stuff, can really help have different methods. And so there's a simple method we're going to use today, the bear pit method I just mentioned, which is quite intense, the bear pit method, and really helps people learn quite a lot about themselves. This Goldfish Bowl method is useful where you just want a small targeted conversation, and the majority of people act as observers. You know, if people might feel overwhelmed or exposed in this kind of environment, using this Goldfish Bowl method on a one-on-one where people observe the conversation, and eventually after a conversation's played out, using a structured method, then some of the observers do also get to comment and do get to reflect the situations and certain situations back. So it's another tool in the bag that we could show people and trial it next year for those that wish. We've got another one there, Shelley. I think it's the De Bono one next. And some of you might have come across this De Bono, six thinking, is it six? Yes, six thinking hats. And again, this is another technique where rather than come with your own mindset and your own baggage and your own life experience, you are forced, so each questioner or person around the sounding board, around the discussion table, comes with a perspective. It can feel a little bit forced, but it's actually really good for stretching your own thinking and challenging your own patterns of thinking and behaviour. Would you just pop the next slide on, Shelley? You'll get these as slides. I don't want to labour over these too much because we want you to get chatting in the way we're going to look in a second, but we just wanted to share with you. There are others, but we find these methods that we're just whizzing through as a whistle stop set of examples that we can look at with people. They're different ways that you can work with teams or work with groups, or collectively troubleshoot challenges in different ways to either tackle things, innovate things, or build trust or change behaviours in different ways. So come the new year, when we get into action learning groups beyond the programme, for people that want to do that, we can work with people to use some of these methods if that's going to help their own sort of troubleshooting or their own development. But for today, Shelley, I think if we move one slide on, Shelley's going to talk through what we're going to do with today's version, and then we're going to get into groups, and we can go. I'm trying to think what time lunch is. I've got the thing here. We can run over slightly, I think, because it will be important to get at least a couple of goes at this. So yeah, we want to make sure. I think if we'll probably do lunch at 1:30 and give people a half-hour lunch break. No, sorry, lunch at 12:30 till 1. So yeah, we've got time to do 2, I think.
Yeah, so this is a 20-minute cycle, and what we're aiming to do is 2 cycles, and this is a quick fire version. These timings absolutely aren't set in stone. You might decide that you need to spend more time unpacking an issue, but this is just to give you an idea of how quickly you can run through this cycle. Now, so this is the kind of nuts and bolts of an action learning group. If anyone can screenshot this slide, that would be great. We'll also put it in the chat, but it might be easier for you to screenshot it so you can see what we're working to. Now, when we put you in your sets, if one person could agree to be the timekeeper, just keep an eye on the time and that the group is adhering to the stage that you're meant to be at. That would be fantastic. So agree that just before you start. So I'll talk you through these 6 stages. And stage 1, so the set member, so everyone in the set shares the issue that they're interested in working on. And we find it's really useful to phrase your question with a how. So how can I, how can we, how can I know, how can I do this? And that frames it in a nice positive way. So whatever the issue is, we're not framing it as a problem, we're framing it as a how can I. If someone could describe the issues for the group, that would be really useful. Then as a group, decide on 2 issues that you'd like to take forward. And the first issue holder then presents their issues to the set as clearly and concisely as possible. So this is a really short amount of time that you've got here. So be specific, don't ramble. This isn't a chatting shop, as Jenny rightly points out. We do love to talk, and sometimes we can go into a bit too much information. So clear and concise, what's your problem? So in stage 3, we then start to get to the meat of the action learning. So stage 3 is questions for clarification. Now the set members can then ask the issue holder closed-ended questions for clarification. Now I'm just going to show you the difference between closed-ended questions and open-ended questions, and you may be familiar with these already, but the closed-ended questions have limited responses. They could be yes, no, or other short answers. They tend to start with things like can, did, will, or have. They give you facts. They're easy to answer and they're quick to answer. So really specific questions that can have short answers. And that's for stage 3. Then stage 4, this is where we really start to unpack it. And the questions in stage 4 are questions to help the issue holder. So they must be open-ended coaching style questions. They mustn't be suggestions. We mustn't be offering advice or solutions in this stage. We're asking questions to help them gain clarity on their issue, to provoke deeper thinking and explore options and find what their own ways forward. And what we find in this section is, because we're all such helpful beasts, we try to offer solutions. So resist that. If the person doing the timekeeping can keep an eye on that and indicate if somebody's actually offering leading questions or trying to solve problems, there'll be a time for that a bit later on. So after 10 minutes of that, the issue holder then summarises the progress they've made and what the course of action they'd like to take it is. So this is their commitment to themselves, to the group, as to what action they're going to take as a result of the action learning process. And then we have the resources round. So all those ideas that you've been holding on to throughout this process, all those brilliant suggestions, pieces of information, knowledge, ideas of someone you should speak to. This is where the set can then contribute that to the issue holder and say, have you tried this? You could do this. I know who you should speak to. So that's the opportunity.
There's always ways as well, Shelley, aren't there, of putting those as direct messages in the chat as well, if time gets tight and that kind of thing, you know.
Absolutely. And this is one of the beauties of action learning, is you get some fantastic coaching opportunity and a way to develop your own solutions to the problem, which ultimately you are the expert in. But there's also could be someone in your set who has the knowledge, a piece of information that you need to know to move faster on this particular issue. So it's fantastic. I've always had brilliant experience with action learning. Find it really helps to get unstuck with things that you might be finding it difficult to work out on your own. So that's the process.
In terms of being able to get into groups to have a go at this, and there's a lot of information there, and you know, it's a lot to hold in your mind, and we're not expecting you to do that. Shelley, I think is going to, we can do 2 things. We've asked people if they want to screenshot or print screen, and they can cut and paste these into a Word document or into a PowerPoint, whatever's easy for them if they want to have quick access to this. Or we will put these in the chat. So it might be worth coming off your slideshare, Shelley. If you can put the process in the chat. So
yeah, I'll do that.
We've got that to cut and paste. Where did it? We appreciate if we were in a physical space, this would be a lot easier because we can just hand you a load of handouts, and that would be more straightforward. I'm just checking, Shelley, are these in the worksheet pack?
These weren't, no, we added these in.
Absolutely. So don't be worried about looking for these in your worksheet pack. Shelley's going to put the content in the chat so you can cut and paste that across. Or you may already have chosen to print screen to have a go at this. So in a moment, I'm going to open some breakouts, and you know, we hope that anybody sort of looking and listening at this as a recap has found that sort of helpful for starters. We'll get back in touch with people in the new year when we're ready for starting actual action learning.
So does anyone have any questions about the process before we